Before Buddy Rogers was pro wrestling's first nature boy, he was Herman Gustav Rode Jr. from Camden, New Jersey, born February 20th, 1921, to German immigrants. Growing up in New Jersey, young Rode excelled in various sports like football, track, boxing, and swimming, but it was wrestling where he really stood out. Rode went on to win the Camden YMCA Wrestling League Championship, and after a short stint in the United States Navy upon turning 18, heard the call of wrestling once again. Joining a circus, he took on all-comers in shoot matches and faced other pros in worked bouts. Rode would try other jobs, even briefly working as a police officer, but the lure of the wrestling ring continued to call him back. Rode had his first official pro wrestling match on July 4th, 1939, defeating Mo Brazen. After 3 years of working small shows, he moved on to Eastern Sports Enterprises based in Atlantic City. Using both his real name of Herman Rode and the nickname Dutch Rode, the future Nature Boy appeared in and around New Jersey through 1943. Rode then spent a month in the Jim Crockett-owned territory in North Carolina under the name Wally Ward. Finding his fortunes were no better in the Carolinas, Rode returned to New Jersey for the next 2 years, winning some and losing some, but never reaching the goals he set. For more than 5 years, Rode had mostly stayed in New Jersey and New York, with the occasional trip to Pennsylvania and the month-long run in North Carolina. While he was considered a top star in his home state and even gained a victory over Ed Strangler Lewis, Rode had set his sights on bigger things. Looking for a change of scenery, Rode packed his bags, landing in Texas for the first real step in making him a legend. Taking the name his brother John used a few years earlier, the man now called Buddy Rogers wasted little time making his mark. With tag team partner Otto Kuss, Rogers took the Gulf Atlantic Club version of the Texas Tag Team Championship on May 21, 1945. It was the first championship Rogers held in his career. Developing a new, more flamboyant and cockier persona, it wasn't long before Rogers was rising as a single star, defeating Dave Levin for the Texas Heavyweight Championship on July 20, 1945, his first singles title. That earned him several shots at National Wrestling Association World Champion Bill Longson, though Rogers never took that title. Rogers' Texas run also saw the beginning of his longest-standing feud, as Rogers and Lou Thez fought over the Texas title through the first half of 1946. Rogers dropped the belt to Thez in May, but quickly regained the title before losing it to Kay Bell and leaving Texas to work in and around Ohio. That is when the Buddy Rogers everyone remembers started to take shape, as he bleached his hair blonde and ramped up the cocky personality. Promoter Jack Pfeffer gave Rogers the nickname Natural Guy, which at some undetermined point morphed into the much more palatable Nature Boy. Becoming something of a traveling act, Rogers proved to be a draw at the gate in several cities across the country. Rogers battled to win the AWA World title in Ohio, the National Wrestling Association World title in Missouri, and the National Wrestling Alliance World title in California. As the 1950s came around, Rogers' flashy look and legitimate wrestling skills made him one of the biggest stars in pro wrestling, as television was becoming more prominent in the United States. But he even briefly had a valet in those early TV days named Slave Girl Moolah, who would go on to be a star in her own right as the Fabulous Moolah. The feud with Thez was back in the spotlight for Rogers with the 1950s as well. Thez had become the unified NWA World's Champion, and Rogers was likely his most unrelenting challenger. The two drew large crowds across the country, with Thez representing the traditional, hard-working champion, clashing with the more flamboyant, boisterous Rogers. The conflicting styles led to a feud outside the ring as well as in it, which would come into play in 1957. After almost a decade as champion, Thez was ready to drop the world title. The NWA wanted to put the belt on Buddy, but Thez refused, and insisted on losing the title to his friend Dick Hutton. Hutton kept the championship just over a year before losing it to Pat O'Connor. Finally, after a year-and-a-half reign by O'Connor, Rogers took the NWA World's Championship on June 30th, 1961 at Comiskey Park in Chicago, in front of a then-record crowd for a wrestling card. Exactly how many people were there depends on the source, but I'll say it was around 40,000. Ironically, reaching the peak of his profession was also the moment things started to go downhill for Rogers. The Nature Boy was criticized for favoring the Northeast rather than defending more across the country. It's been said the injuries Rogers suffered during this time were no accident, as promoters and shooters took out their aggression on the Maverick. The NWA itself soured on Rogers, and on January 24, 1963, they brought Lou Thesz out of semi-retirement to ensure Rogers dropped the title. But not everybody agreed with the decision. Vincent J. McMahon and Toots Mondt of the New York-based Capital Wrestling Corporation refused to recognize Thesz as the world champion, to the point they pulled out of the NWA, rebranded as the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, and officially recognized Rogers as the first WWWF World Champion on April 11, 1963. Unfortunately, the reign would be short. A mild heart attack robbed Rogers of his endurance, and on May 17, 1963, he dropped the WWWF title to Bruno Sammartino and entered semi-retirement, being regulated to a few short matches a year. Though he did retire by the end of the 1960s, Rogers had one more run left in him. In the late 1970s, with Rogers well into his 50s, he came out of retirement for a short run in Florida before moving on to the Mid-Atlantic territory. Though he primarily served as a manager for the likes of Jimmy Snuka and John Studd, Rogers did feud with a rising star in the Carolinas going by the name Nature Boy Ric Flair. Rogers would officially pass the torch to Flair in the Battle of the Figure 4 Leg Locks, a submission move created by Buddy Rogers. Before stepping out of the ring for the last time, Rogers did return to what was now the World Wrestling Federation, having his last match on September 17, 1983 in Baltimore, tagging with Jimmy Snuka as they defeated Lou Albano and Don Morocco. Finally retired for good, Rogers moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida in the late 1980s, where he lived until his death in 1992 at the age of 71. Rogers spent his entire career working his way to the top, only to spend what was comparatively a moment in the spotlight. However, the mold he created inspired countless wrestlers such as Ray Stevens, Eddie Graham, Buddy Landel, and most notably, Ric Flair. The mark he left on pro wrestling is bigger than any title, and in many ways his legacy lives on today. To a nicer guy, it couldn't have happened.